Hey everyone, this is Russ from Retro Game Core. So we're going to do kind of a low-key video today. I just got back from travel last night, and it was kind of an adventure. I was supposed to be gone for about a week. It turned into almost 2 weeks because immediately upon getting there, I ended up getting COVID. And so instead of going for the business trip that I had planned on doing, I basically just sat in a hotel room for a while. But I'm a glass half full kind of guy, and so I kind of decided to make the best of it. And in doing so, I spent a lot of time with some retro handhelds that I brought. Now, if you follow me on social media, like on Twitter or my YouTube community page, you probably saw that I had a bit of a decision to make before I left which device I wanted to actually bring. And so I ended up bringing 3 devices, mostly based on everyone else's feedback, and that was the Steam Deck, the PS Vita, and the Miyoo Mini. Now, I had my own reasons for bringing all 3 of those, and we'll go into that here in this video. And it turns out that I learned a lot about traveling with retro handhelds along the way. Now, I'm no stranger to traveling around. I've been in the military for over 22 years at this point, and the last 2 tours that I did, I was on the road about half the time. But this was my first time traveling since the pandemic and getting into retro handhelds. And so in this video, I'm going to share my experiences and maybe a couple tips and tricks when it comes to traveling when you're focusing on retro gaming like me. Now, first thing off the bat, I think everybody travels differently, and so the way that I travel, the things that I think are important may not be important to you. And that's totally cool. This is literally just how I experienced it over the past couple weeks. So I think we'll just, jump into it here. I don't have a script or anything. We're just going to kind of go off the cuff. To start, let's talk about how I actually travel. So I usually take a checked bag with me that has all my clothes and uniforms and things like that. And then for my carry-on, I actually have a backpack. And I've been using the same backpack for years here. And it's just this one here. It's got lots of nice little pockets and little holders and things like that. But this is typically what I use, just a standard backpack. Now, the reason why I like to take a backpack with me is because I actually slip it under the seat in front of me while on a flight. I'm not so concerned about the leg room, but I like to have the easy access to all my stuff right then and there. And so typically inside, I'll have a bunch of snacks and things like that, but then of course my electronics. Now, for many years, I've used an electronics bag like this. This allows me to put all my cables and cords, batteries, and my headphones and things like that. And so this was something that I planned on taking with me anyway. But that actually started my first problem, and that's the fact that the Steam Deck itself, the case that comes with it, is kind of huge. And so these 2 together actually don't really fit in a backpack. Usually I would shove this into the bottom of the backpack and then have a little space on top for things. But this was just way too big. And so in my flights out from Hawaii to Texas, I did try to shove them both in the same bag, and it just ended up making everything too cramped. And so on the way back, I ended up ditching this thing and just throwing all the cables and everything else directly into the backpack so that I had space for the Steam Deck with no problem. So I think that if you are going to take an electronics bag with you, I would recommend getting something a little bit smaller and maybe something narrower too, so that it would be like complementary to the Steam Deck case instead inside of your backpack. So that was lesson number 1. And while we're on the subject here, let's actually keep talking about the Steam Deck. And so this was going to be my primary handheld. This is the one that I thought would play just about everything. I was torn between taking a large handheld PC like the Steam Deck or maybe the Neo Next, or something a little bit smaller like the Odin Pro. And I ended up taking the Steam Deck mostly because there were some specific games that I wanted to play on this that wouldn't play on the Odin. But I did have some reservations about taking this in the first place. Number 1 was battery life anxiety. The flights from Hawaii are pretty long, and so I thought, oh man, this is gonna suck if I'm like halfway through the flight and my battery's just completely dead. And that's something that you do have to worry about with the Steam Deck depending on what you're playing. But it turns out that those fears are mostly unwarranted on larger planes like the ones that fly from Hawaii to the mainland. And that's because most of them have plugs at the bottom of the seat, so you can actually just plug in your Steam Deck and charge it as you're playing. And so when it came down to it, battery life was not an issue when I was flying. Now, if I didn't have the ability to charge it while on the plane, my plan was to play as much as I could during the flights, and then in between the flights, I would plug these into a battery pack, and then as I'm walking around, going to different gates and stuff like that, the Steam Deck would charge up. But that actually ran into a new problem that I really hadn't thought about. And that's the fact that on the Steam Deck itself, within the case, you can't actually charge the Steam Deck. And that's because the charging port is actually at the top of the Steam Deck, and that's also where the top of the case actually folds over. And so because of that, you don't really have a place to be able to plug it in and angle it correctly. Now, if Valve had actually changed it so that the top of the device was near where the zipper was, that would have been a lot more handy, because then you could have plugged it in and then zipped around it, and you would have been able to charge while it's still being protected in the case. And the Steam Deck itself, without a case, is not something I would be comfortable just throwing into a backpack. It needs a hard shell case like this. Now, one thing I didn't expect when traveling in public with the Steam Deck is just just how socially awkward it is to bring out a giant device like that. I'm the type of guy who kind of likes to travel discreetly, but I remember one specific connecting flight where I was sitting in the middle and I had two guys on each side of me. I remember pulling this thing out and then opening it up, and they both just kind of turned towards me and they were like, "What is that thing?" It was massive. It was like not something that you could easily ignore. And that also brought up a kind of unique point, is that neither of these people, who were a little bit younger than me, but still in my age group, had never even heard of this thing at all. And so as popular as this thing actually is, it doesn't feel like it's actually breaking into the mainstream. But at the end of the day, I think it is a good point to make that if you just want to kind of keep to yourself and not really have anyone bothering you, pulling out a Steam Deck is not a good thing, because people are going to want to talk to you about what the heck that thing is. Now, in all other respects, it was actually really fun to travel with this Steam Deck. I found in particular that when you turn the tray table down so you could rest your hands on it, it was actually very comfortable, especially when playing first-person shooters. I played a lot of Halo 4 on the ride over, and actually it was a lot of fun. I think just overall being able to rest it like you're sitting at a desk basically, made it a very comfortable experience, about just as good as playing it on an Xbox. But one thing I will say, just in having it in that position and kind of looking down, it did kind of hurt my neck over some time. So I did have to take breaks just because I had to look down as I was playing. Typically, if I was going to be sitting on the couch or whatever, that's the time where I would just kind of lay on my back and play it for a little bit and then come up again or whatever. I wasn't able to actually do that on an airplane. And so it does get a little bit cramped as you're playing for long extended periods. But that's all good. I'm not the kind of guy who actually likes to play for like 4 hours at a time. I think an hour at a time is perfect for me. Another thing that I really didn't expect with the Steam Deck is just how awesome it is to play with over-ear headphones, especially since the Steam Deck is Bluetooth compatible. And so it was really nice to kind of turn the noise canceling on, just kind of get immersed in the game, and then just have fun. Like I mentioned, I played a lot of Halo 4 just to kind of get a feel for playing a first-person shooter game on the Steam Deck, but then I also spent most of my time playing Hades. Now, Hades isn't the most robust game in the world, but I really wasn't trying to push the limits of my Steam Deck. I was just kind of trying to relax and have fun, and that was a really perfect fit. Now, I still haven't beat that stupid game yet. I'm trying as hard as I can. I think I've got like 60 attempts to escape out of Hades, but I just am not getting there quite yet. Now, long story short, I had a lot of fun with the Steam Deck, and in the end of the day, this is the only handheld I ended up playing while on travel. There just never really seemed to be the right moment to break out the PS Vita or the Miyoo Mini. It also turns out, while I was stuck in a hotel for a week, this was also the primary thing that I played as well. Just because it was really comfortable to be able to lay back on the bed or sit up in the bed or go sit at the desk and play it, it was just kind of a really versatile way of playing it. Now, unfortunately, I made no plans to actually sit in a hotel room, so I didn't bring like an HDMI cable or USB-C hub or anything else like that. And so unfortunately, I was stuck with handheld gaming. I couldn't play on the big TV that they had there in the room. And I guess in that same regard, I didn't bring anything to use this as a computer either. And I think that would have been a pretty good opportunity to figure out whether or not the Steam Deck would have been a good fit for using it as a primary PC for a short duration of time. But I didn't have a keyboard or a mouse or anything else like that, so I didn't even try. And of course, I brought my laptop with me too, and so it didn't really make sense anyway. And so I think that's something we'll just have to save for a different video. Now let's move on to the PS Vita. And I brought it here. I had it in a little Nintendo Switch case, and I had it in my backpack the whole time, but like I mentioned before, I really didn't bust it out. Now at the point where I was stuck at the hotel, I did break it out every once in a while, but it turns out that I didn't really have the urge to play it. And this was kind of a weird thing, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and I think I might actually do a dedicated video about it too. The main reason why I brought the PS Vita in the first place was to play games that I could only play on the PS Vita. If you don't know already, the PS Vita has a great catalog to it, and a lot of those games I've never even touched yet. But when it came down to it, as I sat down to play the PS Vita, I found that I actually didn't want to play those games. And not because I didn't find those games fun or entertaining, it was because I felt like it was a relic that I didn't want to spoil for later. It's almost like because the PS Vita is just a dead device at this point, I felt like I wanted to save it for a rainy day. And that kind of makes zero sense when you think about it logically, but that's what was going on in my head. I was like picking up a game and I'd be like, I should really wait to play this when I really need to play it. So it's just kind of a weird thing, where I had the PS Vita, I had all these games on it, and I was like, I can really jump into one of these, and then I kept choosing not to do it. And I think a lot of that has to come with the fact that I just love the PS Vita so much that I'm not quite ready to dive into it yet. And I know that's contradictory, but that was the thing I kept coming back to, was the fact that I wanted to play the Steam Deck because I knew I had all those games, my cloud saves and all that other kind of stuff, but the PS Vita I wanted to save for something more special than when I'm stuck in a hotel room with COVID. But I will say that the sleep function on the PS Vita is absolutely incredible. You know, I would turn it off and leave it for like 2 days, turn it back on, and it wouldn't even have drained 1 percentage point from the battery. And that's pretty incredible, especially compared to other retro handhelds. So yes, I absolutely love the PS Vita, but I just really haven't found the place to play it just yet. Okay, so now let's wrap things up with talking about the last device that I brought, which is the Miyoo Mini. Now this thing I brought intentionally because I knew I was going to be traveling with a bunch of people, and I knew that none of them actually played retro handhelds, and so I knew this would be the perfect little device to kind of introduce people to the whole world of retro handheld gaming. I mean, look at it. It is so ridiculously cute. It's very nostalgic with its kind of like gray coloring to it, and everybody loved it. In fact, I probably sold a few of these things just to my companions who I had been traveling with because they saw this and they just fell in love. They could play their Nintendo games all the way up to PS1 on this little thing. And you know, I did a recent video about the Miyoo Mini versus the 280V, and the Miyoo Mini wasn't my favorite. The 280V was the one that I actually liked playing better, and that had to do more with the buttons and the controls than anything. And sure enough, by taking the Miyoo Mini on travel, the same thing happened. I would pick it up, but the controls just didn't feel great to me. You know, the fact that the buttons just squeak a little bit when you push down on them, and they sometimes will get stuck and they rub against the sides of the case, all those things kind of drive me nuts because it prevents me from enjoying the game to its fullest. And so while I appreciate that I brought the Miyoo Mini with me, I just didn't have a lot of fun playing it. It was a perfect device to show off to people who aren't that picky like me, but all the same, when it came down to it, I just didn't feel like playing retro games on this thing. Now, the silver lining to that is I actually have the Miyoo Mini version 2. It came in the mail while I was away. And so I'll do a video on this hopefully pretty soon, and I'm really hoping that the buttons on this are improved from the previous one. And if they are, oh my gosh, I'm gonna love this thing so much. Now on top of that, there's actually a new operating system available for the Miyoo Mini. It's called Mini UI, and I actually put it on my Miyoo Mini as I was taking it with me on travel because I wanted to test with it, and I am supremely impressed with it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and so when I do my Miyoo Mini version 2 video, I'll also feature that firmware on top of new updates to Onion OS. And so yeah, at the end of the day, these are the 3 devices that I traveled with, and I had a lot of fun traveling despite the whole getting sick and all that other stuff. If I were to do this trip all over again, I think I would make some changes, and I think the only other device I would have brought besides the Steam Deck or the Odin Pro, you know, one of those devices that can play a little bit of everything, would have been something really small and pocketable. So something like the Miyoo Mini, if it was a little bit easier to play with, or the Anbernic RG280V. At the end of the day, I think those 2 ends of the spectrum are perfect for travel, and I think there's room if you just wanted to get a mid-sized device, something like the RG351MP or something like that, that could also function as your primary device as well. At the end of the day, I'm just super happy I brought all 3 of them with me. I wasn't expecting to be delayed in my travel and stuck in a hotel room instead of at work. And so in that regard, I think it was kind of cool that I did a little bit of overkill and brought a little bit more than I needed because it ended up that I did actually need them because I was so dang bored. But all the same, I also caught up on sleep and some Netflix as well. Anyway, I think this video has been going on long enough, but I hope you enjoyed just a little bit of insight into what it's like to travel with some retro handhelds, especially coming from somebody who is well versed in travel but had never actually traveled with a handheld before. I'll leave links in the video description to some of the things that I talked about in this video, and as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.